Unfortunately, one of the most influential, if not the most influential and listened to political pundit in all of America is Tucker Carlson on Fox News. He is a known white nationalist. He doesn't exactly try to hide it. And just an absolute ghoul. Like an absolute ghoul. And it is pretty nightmarish that of all the people in the world to be the most listened to political pundit in America, it's Tucker Carlson, a literal white nationalist. But that is the world we live in. That is the America we live in. And to give you like an insight into the level of honesty that Tucker Carlson adheres to, like in case we get a Tucker Carlson fan watching, like a potential Tucker Carlson fan ends up clicking the video. Here's an NPR article I really like. Here's a quote. "You literally can't believe the facts Tucker Carlson tells you. So says Fox's lawyers." Tucker Carlson appears to be made of Teflon. Fox News' top-rated host has been repeatedly accused of anti-immigrant and racist comments, which have cost his political opinion show many of its major advertisers. Yet Carlson endures in his primetime slot. Carlson even attacked his own network's chief news anchor on the air with no real consequences. That anchor, Shepard Smith, quit mid-contract shortly after Carlson went after him. Now comes the claim that you can't expect to literally believe the words that come out of Carlson's mouth. And that assertion is not coming from Carlson's critics. It's being made by a federal judge in the Southern District of New York and by Fox News' own lawyers in defending Carlson against accusations of slander. It worked, by the way. Just read U.S. District Judge Mary Kay Viscosil's, that's the best thing I could get out of that name's opinion, leaning heavy on the arguments of Fox News' lawyers. The quote-unquote general tenor of the show should then inform a viewer that Carlson is not stating actual facts about the topics he discusses and is instead engaging in exaggeration and non-literal commentary. So, not only did Tucker Carlson get off for slander, but the way he got off was by his lawyers saying, yeah, well, like, he's so exaggerated and crazy that he's playing a character. No one could actually take anything he says seriously. That's why he should be allowed to get away with lying. So, we're talking about someone here who has essentially admitted that he lies to avoid legal consequences for lying. Like, he had the default onto saying everything I say is coming from a character, I'm lying, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, to avoid legal consequences for the slander he does regularly on his show. Yeah, he did the Alex Jones defense, but it was actually effective back then. Didn't work for Alex Jones, but it worked for Tucker Carlson. So, the reason why I bring all this up before we get into what I'm going to be discussing here is to give you like a little bit of an intro on Tucker, or a reminder, a refresher on Tucker Carlson in case you were a little bit, hazy, a little bit behind on what he was all about. So the tweet in question we're going to be talking about here is from Tucker himself, who has she, hers, and the Ukraine flag in his bio. Lovely. And fully vaccinated as well. I forgot. Tucker is, of course, an anti-vaxxer. It really wild how, like, back in, like, 2016, 2015, like, anti-vaxxers were, like, the butt of, like they were the lowest hanging of fruit to make fun of. And now it is, like, every Republican has to be an anti-vaxxer. Stop. Yeah, okay, I'll stop misgendering her. Sorry, I won't misgender her. Sorry. Anyway, Tucker tweeted this. The trans movement, it turns out, is the mirror image of Christianity, and therefore its natural enemy, people who believe they're God and can't stand to be reminded that they're not. So what we're seeing right now is a reminder of the fact that people who believe in Christianity are actually kind of dangerous. Fundamentalist, like, religiosity is actually pretty dangerous. And, like, we need to get this, like, cucked liberal idea that, like, these people aren't causing any harm out of our heads because they're actually very dangerous, regardless of the religion. Like, pretty much all religions out there have extreme fundamentalists that are extremely dangerous to our country, but particularly here in America, it's Christians. And they actually believe, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them actually believe the shit that Christianity dictates. Like, they aren't just saying they believe it for some social power, like they actually are true believers. That's really dangerous levels of derangement. They believe they have divine permission from, like, the all-seeing God himself to go out and kill trans people. Like, God himself would endorse this action. Let's go ahead and watch this clip.
It was just last week that we noticed that parts of the transgender movement seem to be getting militant and possibly dangerous. We did a whole segment about it on Thursday night. That segment...
What he means by this is, like, trans people are actually buying guns and using their Second Amendment rights to bear arms. One trans person did a shooting. Like, trans people are extremely disproportionately underrepresented when it comes to any type of gun violence whatsoever, particularly mass shootings. But because there was a recent shooting that's gotten a lot of publicity, mostly from these people, they're going to use it to try to suggest that this is like an epidemic. It happened once, but let's pretend like it's an epidemic because, you know, people feel like it is. It's all feels. It's all like vibes and feels here. Guns for some that's really funny because you have to remember here, what Tucker's going to be advocating for effectively is the disarming of an entire, like, social group. And Tucker is supposed to be all about, like, pro Second Amendment and all of that, but an armed minority group that you want to genocide is a lot harder to genocide. So the idea here is like this straw man that I guess the trans community only wants trans people to have guns. Like the left only wants minorities to be armed, and they want to disarm white men. They're getting more deranged by the day.
It was sparred by an NPR segment we had heard and never expected to hear. NPR is always...
Hey, that's the article. That's where we read the article. That directly cited Tucker Carlson's lawyers.
As a matter of editorial policy, completely opposes civilian ownership of firearms, with the possible exception of maybe IRS agents. Yet here suddenly was that very same station, National Public Radio, positively urging trans people to buy guns, as many guns as possible, and if necessary, to use them. The world is dangerous, explained one trans gun owner. You have to be dangerous back. And
I can assure you, what he means by this is an NPR article was done where they interviewed some trans people, and some of those trans people were gun owners who said that. And that was their quote in the article. And so Tucker Carlson's going to claim that means NPR wants only trans people to be armed.
And that seems strange to us. Is the United States really a dangerous place for trans people? Well, West Baltimore is dangerous. You could easily get murdered there. What? But if you're trans in this country, obviously there are many downsides, but they're doing...
Yes, statistically, very much so. The chances of being sexually abused or assaulted as a trans person are disproportionately higher than even cis women. Like, if you're a trans woman, you're more likely to be sexually assaulted or outright assaulted or have any violence done upon you, statistically speaking, than a cis woman is. That's a pretty solid statistic.
There appear to be some benefits. It's a lot easier to get into Harvard, for example. It's definitely...
To be fair, getting into Harvard isn't as hard as these people do try to pretend it is, because, like, Ben Shapiro came from Harvard. A lot of these right-wing demagogues came from Harvard. It's a prestigious school, but, like, a lot of them come from, like, Harvard Law School, and it's like, yeah. Regardless, though, that out of the way, I forgot what I was going to say because I have the munchies. Let me eat my brownie.
Easier to get a job at Citibank or in the Biden White House. If you're transgender...
Yeah, this is the thing I brought up earlier. The conservative victimhood complex. The idea that it is in fact straight white men, cis straight white men, that have become the new most oppressed minority group, or I guess majority group, in the country. That now there is so much affirmative action and privilege for trans people, and everyone's like, oh, trans people are so brave and stunning, that they just skip through life without a single care in the world. That's legitimately how these conservatives think.
Can so much as fly a...
Not Tucker Carlson, he's a liar, but his fans think that.
Kite, the Pentagon will happily make you an F-35 pilot, just so Hollywood can make a movie about it. Identifying as trans, whatever
There's no way Tucker Carlson did not jack off to Top Gun Maverick. What is he talking about? So now, like, hating our troops and shitting on our troops is good as long as they're trans? They just say anything. That's such a good way to put it, Colt Son. That's really the only good response to this. They just say anything.
Again, its downsides does convey status in this country, which is why so many young people now do. Not a lot of 19-year-olds are pretending to be car mechanics or linemen for a regional power company in eastern Ohio, but plenty of college freshmen do pretend to be members of the opposite sex. And why wouldn't?
Was that just a very drawn-out, fallen flat attack helicopter joke? Like, you identify as a woman? Might as well identify as a electrician. Okay, transgenders destroyed, I guess.
The people in charge despise working-class whites, but they venerate the trans community. People are just responding to incentives. It's rational in a way. But that does not explain the anger that we heard in that NPR segment. Why are some trans people so angry, and why do they seem to...
I don't know. I don't know why. I could never guess. I simply cannot guess.
...be mad specifically at traditional Christians? We can't think of any trans person who's ever been murdered...
The most oppressed group, Christian white cis-het men.
...by a pastor. As far as we know, that has never happened. So it's not an actual threat of violence from Christians that's inspiring some trans people to buy AR-15s. No.
No, it is. It's a threat from the state in particular. Particularly the state. The idea that the right is going to take enough control of the state to implement the laws they have actively been passing in hard red states everywhere. Yeah. No, it's not like, oh, we're worried they're going to do this. No. It's they're doing this in the states where they have power. God help us if they can get power on a federal level, and God help us if they can get more power on a state level. Like, they got to be stopped.
No, it's got to be more fundamental than that, and it is. The trans movement is the mirror image of Christianity, and therefore its natural enemy. In Christianity, the price of admission...
Okay, this idea that, like, transgenderism is a religion is definitionally false. Like, it is definitionally false, to be clear. These people talk so much about definitions and the left butchering words and what words mean and whatnot, and yet they call the idea of someone's gender being separate from their sex and being an identity that's based around how you identify, that's a religion? It's not. It's not. There's nothing religious about that. Not to mention, like, there's science and very good, like, data behind this and studies and good... There's good shit about this, okay? There's solid info that you can access about this. The idea of gender dysphoria, the reasons why someone would identify as trans, the data that represents the fact that trans people, upon transitioning and having validation from those in their lives, their lives improve, like statistically significantly so, without fail, in almost every case. On top of that, like, the idea that, like, gender and sex aren't the same thing has been, like, widely accepted by the scientific community. This is, like, consensus at this point. Like, you can't pretend like you actually care about facts or logic or whatever, or science or reality, while still being on board with this whole, like, anti-trans panic culture war thing.
Is admitting that you're not God. Christians openly concede that they have no...
Okay, so I think the argument he's going to try to make is the idea that a trans person can say their gender is something different from what they were assigned at birth means that they think they're God, because conservatives believe that God determines your gender. So, like, a lot, and, well, I don't think Tucker actually believes this, because Tucker is, you know, an insane liar. I think his fans actually genuinely believe this. I think they seriously think trans people think they're God because they, like, I don't believe Christians can internalize the idea of people who aren't Christians, like lefties who are like atheist or agnostic, not believing in God. I think like a lot of these people unironically believe that lefties also believe in God, but they're just Satanists. Like they believe in all of it and they know it's true. They're just against God. They just oppose God, right? And so in Tucker's audience's view, I should say, they believe that all the lefties and all the trans people absolutely know that everything that the religious Christians believe is true, but they oppose it nonetheless. That's essentially the idea that Tucker's trying to push, which is delusional, like very delusional.
No real power over anything, and for that matter, very little personal virtue. They will tell you to your face that they are sinful and helpless and basically absurd. They're not embarrassed about any of this. They brag about it.
Well, consider the fact that Christians consider, like, getting a blowjob a sin. So, like, yeah, a lot of lefties will proudly say they're sinful because the things that religious people consider sins, like beyond killing and whatnot, tend to be pretty insane and, like, authoritarian. So, yeah, like, and absurd as well, and cherry-picked, too. So yeah, it's absolutely going to be something that people that don't believe in it and don't want to dictate their lives behind the, like, authoritarian, rigid standards of Christianity are going to take a lot of pride in not being constrained by that and being instead free, like what a lot of conservative Christians like to claim they are, but very clearly aren't.
Saved a wretch like me, goes the most famous Christian hymn ever written in English. The trans movement takes the opposite view. Trans ideology claims dominion over nature itself. We can change the identity we were born with, they will tell you, with...
No, this is a straw man. I mean, it's not surprising that he's going to do a straw man, but it still is one. What trans people actually believe in regards to the point that he's actually trying to... The point that he's straw manning is that the scientific community has come to a very broad and solid consensus that sex and gender are not the same thing. Not only this, but that sex itself is not a binary. That is to say that male and female are not these two, like, rigid categories that everybody fits into with no outliers. In fact, scientists have come to a conclusion that sex, biological sex, particularly when it comes to its, what's the word for it? It's, the way that it shows up in physical, sexual characteristics is best displayed on a spectrum between masculine or male and feminine or female, because there are many people who, in regards to their, like, physical features, fall into sort of a middle point or onto the extremes, right? And there are people who fall more into the middle as well. With that said, though, sex on a chromosomal level, which is what a lot of these conservatives will try to, like, fall back on when they're, like, really desperate, even that isn't as simple. There are shit tons of different combinations of intersex hormone combinations, which are, I believe they're now referred to by a different name, like differences in sexual development. DSDs, I think, is the term. DSDs, differences in sexual development, I believe is the term, which can basically bore out in, like, for example, you may be a cis guy in chat, like, you're just chilling here with your cock and balls nice and sweaty in your hand right now watching my stream, and, like, maybe you get an x-ray or whatever, or it wouldn't be an x-ray, would it be like an MRI or what? I don't know, it wouldn't be it might be, I don't know my fucking scans or whatever, and you might have, like, a uterus inside you. Like that it's rare, but that's happened. There's been dudes, like cis dudes, cock and balls, they work just fine, go to the doctor, get a scan, and it's like, sir, I don't know how to tell you this, but yeah, like an ultrasound, there's a uterus in there. Like there's a full, and the reason for this is if you actually look at the most fundamental level of human development, like in the womb, all of us start out on a fundamental level essentially female, and males develop their genitalia like later on in development, while females kind of just not stay with what's there, but like what develops there just kind of continues. It just is much the same, more or less, right? Yeah, you learn this from Jurassic Park when you're a little kid. Everybody knows this. So with that said, there are a lot of areas for things to differ from the norm. There are a lot of ways in which things can differ from the norm. And what conservatives want to do is make all instances in which somebody differs from the norm either A, well, for one, they want to make it completely statistically unaccounted for, right? The idea of there being people like this completely throws a wrench in the idea of there just being men, women, penises, vaginas, XX or XY, and that's it. Like, it throws a wrench in all of it. The intersex hormone combinations, the existence of DIDs, differences in sexual development, or DSDs, not DIDs, DSDs, differences in sexual development. All of these things absolutely blow away this very flimsy tent that the right has built of propaganda around the actual truth around this issue. That's what the right has done. There's a massive amount of resources that basically amount to the truth about the whole trans issue. The right is terrified that that truth is going to be broadly available, that knowledge, that information, those studies, that data is going to become broadly available to the public. And so they built a proverbial tent over that information. But that tent is very, very flimsy. And it's very thin and flammable. So you just got to knock that tent over, or set it on fire, or rip it up. And you do that by exposing the lies, as blatant as they are, and as obvious as they are, to as many people as you can, as loudly as you can.
With wild-eyed certainty, Christians can never agree with this statement because these are powers they believe God alone possesses. That unwillingness to agree, that failure to acknowledge a trans person's dominion over nature, incites and enrages some in the trans community.
Well, no, the thing that incites and enrages people in the trans community is like the fact that laws are being passed that say they're not allowed to be trans. Like, this type of propaganda worked and was more effective back when, like, maybe there were some bills that were trying to keep trans people from going into, like, their preferred bathroom, and there were, like, a law or two that was meant to keep trans people from participating on the sports teams they want to. And that was really hard. It was really hard back then to make the argument that trans people were being systemically discriminated against, and it was way easier for right-wingers to try to claim and slide by with the idea that, like, trans people are doing just fine. There's no, like, oppression or systemic anything going up against them, whatever, you know, whatever it may be. But now it's like, how many times has Tucker had to explain away a don't say gay bill, or a you can't, literally banning of being trans in public bill, as like, no, this is just us representing our values and freedom. Like, how many times has he had to find a way to explain that away, while also now claiming that trans people are just getting mad because people who are Christian don't accept that they're God? It's a complete straw man, and he knows it is. I don't know if his audience does. I hope they don't, because that would mean they have a chance of being, you know, changed. But I hope the majority of Tucker Carlson fans aren't as far gone as him. So far gone that they're willing to just... They don't care about the truth anymore. They just care about winning, so they'll lie. If that's what it takes. You can't convince them. The cognitive dissonance is too deep.
People who believe they're God can't stand to be reminded that they're not. So Christianity and transgender orthodoxy are wholly incompatible theologies. They can never be reconciled. They are on a collision course with each other.
I love their made-up words, transgender orthodoxy.
One side is likely to draw blood before the other side. That's what we concluded last week. Yesterday morning...
Holy shit. Okay, so he's outright calling for, like, he's saying violence will happen. There will be blood because of this. So now he's going to try to claim the shooting was the trans community firing the first shot, and that this is going to justify future shots fired back at the trans community. That's what you're about to see here. On the largest political pundit, the most listened to political pundit in America, Thank God Tucker Carlson's target demographic is dying out fast.
Morning, tragically, our fears were confirmed. A self-identified trans person called Audrey Hale committed mass murder at a Christian school in Nashville. Hale burst into a place called the Convent School and executed 3 9-year-olds as well as 3 adults. Police have released body cam footage.
By the way, if you're curious about whether or not the right actually cares about the deaths of these children, you can look at... I really liked Steven Crowder's tweet that he put out when he was going to cover the shooting. He starts it off with a smile on his face saying, "This is going to be an exciting show, guys, because we've got a lot to talk about. The shooting has all sorts of, like, he's like excited to talk about the shooting. And he's like, it's going to be a fun show, guys." It's very clear the right doesn't actually care about the deaths of these children. Like, I guarantee you, when conservatives found out that this shooter was trans, so many of them just, like, got an actual unironic erection. Like, I know I joke about how, like, oh, you got so excited, you got an erection. No. I think that there was a significant amount of conservatives out there who found out this shooter was trans, and literally their dicks got hard. Like, some percentage of them, that actually happened.
From the end of the massacre, we're showing you just a small part of it. You can see the rest online if you want. We're not going to show it because that's too awful and sad.
I also remember when Ben Shapiro said after the Christchurch shooter, if you don't remember the Christchurch shooter, it happened back in 2019. The shooting was a Nazi shooting, and they put out a manifesto explaining how right-wing content creators radicalized them and all that. And it really, like, kicked off BreadTube, because a lot of BreadTube, like, just a lot of the figures around LeftTube at that time spoke on it, and, like, their influence became particularly, you know, felt at that time. And so, like, that was when kind of BreadTube kicked off, was the Christchurch shooting. That's kind of, like, unrelated, though. When the Christchurch shooting happened, all the right-wingers, particularly Ben Shapiro, I believe Ben Shapiro himself said, do not share the shooter's name, do not share his manifesto or his face. All he wants is attention. Shooters just want attention, starve them of it. But now, though, now it's not a Nazi shooter who's written a manifesto about how conservative content creators radicalize them and encourage them to do this. Now it's a trans shooter who has a ambiguous motivation that's up in the air, but hey, they're trans, so that's good enough. And they're doing exactly the opposite of what they say should be done in the cases where, you know, it's a Nazi shooter. And of course, this shouldn't surprise you, considering the fact they do the same thing if the shooter is black, or if the shooter's, like, I don't know, like, Middle Eastern. Especially if the shooter's Middle Eastern. How many times have you seen, like, a terror attack happens, and it's, like, a Middle Eastern guy did it, and, like, the name is, like, plastered across the screen, and, like, it's clearly not, like, a name that you'd be familiar with. You know, it's not a name you see every day. And you see his face, and, like, it's plastered everywhere on the media, especially right-wing media. But then, like, if it's a white kid school shooter, you don't see his face or his name anywhere. This shouldn't surprise you. The right's been doing this for a long time. They don't actually care about kids dying. If they did, they'd give a little bit more of a shit about gun culture in America.
But what was almost as sickening to see in a far more subtle and insidious way was the media coverage of yesterday's tragedy. Here's Terry Moran of ABC News, for example, suggesting that Christians were murdered in Tennessee because they infringed on the rights of transgendered people. Watch.
Audrey Hale identified herself as a transgender person. The state of Tennessee earlier this month passed, and the governor signed a bill that banned transgender medical care for minors, as well as a law that prohibited adult entertainment, including male and female impersonators, after a series of drag show controversies in that state.
Wait, all he said was that state has passed laws that are infringing on the rights of trans people. If anything, that clip might actually lend credence to Tucker Carlson's claim. Tucker Carlson is trying to claim this was a trans person lashing out at Christians for oppression. That clip would actually lend credence to that argument. But Tucker has to argue against it because he can't let slide the fact that, like, he can't let people get away with, bringing attention to the fact that the right is actively infringing on the freedoms of trans people. It's not a culture war thing anymore. They're actively, like, a minority group fighting for their rights and for their lives.
The state of Tennessee bans the sexual mutilation of children. Children get shot to death in a school. It's caused.
God damn. They banned sexual mutilation of children? Oh my god, how'd they not ban that already? You're telling me sexual mutilation of children wasn't already banned? Until recently? In that state? Oh my god! That's horrifying! No more... Yeah, oh my god, what about circumcisions? Yeah, did they get rid of circumcisions too? Are those banned as well? Okay, all bits aside, of course they didn't, but all bits aside, the reason why they call it child genital mutilation is the same reason why the right hates trans people in the first place. It's to stoke fear and disgust. Conservatives, their disgust responses are distinctly powerful. Their disgust responses are the strongest receptors in their brains. You know, their brains are very smooth and small, but they have one, like, little cancerous nubbin. It looks like kind of a tumor hanging off the side, and that's their disgust and fear response, and that's the conservative brain. So all you have to do is call a medical procedure performed by medical experts with, like, top-of-the-line medical equipment and medical science mutilation, and people will get scared. I'm not even going to get started describing completely, like, uncontroversial medical procedures that we absolutely do on children, like describing them in the same way conservatives describe any form of gender affirming care, because it's sort of a tired argument, but still, right? Not to mention this genital mutilation that Tucker is referring to, which would be like bottom surgery or top surgery, not really happening to minors. There are cases in which, like, if you're 16 or 17, like, you got to be in the later teens, just generally speaking, based on how long you have to be under medical professional supervision, like, as verified, like, trans and identifying as trans to get this surgery. But there are some cases where 16 and 17-year-olds can get top surgery. But as far as I'm aware, there are absolutely no cases of, like, an under 18 person in America getting bottom surgery. And there's even an argument to be made that that wouldn't necessarily be an issue for that to be an option. The discretion of like medical professionals is typically what I would want to default on when it comes to whether or not I don't think that a medical procedure should be age gated if it's determined by medical professionals to be the best course of option, you know? Like, that seems a little bit draconian, doesn't it? Like that a bunch of people's, like, ideological hang-ups are why a medically like a medical procedure that has been determined to be effective in helping people should be, like, age gated. I don't know. Like I believe it should be up to the discretion of doctors and medical professionals, in my opinion. And that's what I'll default on typically, because I know that doctors and medical professionals, and I mean that with an S at the end, not doctor, not medical professional, not study. I mean all of them, the unanimous, like, body of info, data, and mind and brain power that they have come together to create. I trust that way more than I trust myself. Way more. I trust myself to do the research and to look into it, but I obviously am not, like, arrogant or stupid enough to think that I can just inherently know the reality of these things. Conservatives think they do.
Cause and effect. That's what ABC News is telling you. That's not far from justifying mass murder, but others took the next step. A group called the
Holy shit, do you think Tucker's gonna get sued for this? This clip was, like, put out, I think, literally today. He literally just said that, what news outlet was that? He literally just said that ABC was justifying the murder of those kids. I would not be surprised if this results in a massive case. An ABC pundit getting accused by Tucker Carlson of justifying a shooting, an act of terrorism. That's corporate slander. What he just did was absolutely corporate slander. This could be like a corporate legal suit, not just like an individual suit, like where Tucker gets sued, but where Fox gets sued for that. No, he's playing a character. Remember, it's okay. So he can still get sued. That can still be his defense, but he'll still get sued. Fox News could still get sued. They can still get served and have to appear in court or lose by default and have to pay for a defense. Like, even if he has a defense and he's found innocent in the end and he's paid back in full in the end, he'll still he can plead stupidity again like he did last time, but he'll still get sued, or Fox would still get sued. That's how lawsuits work. Aren't they getting sued at the moment too? Like, Fox News is always getting sued for like misinformation and slander. They're like a literal like hive of that shit. They also do a lot of lawsuits themselves, like slap suits. So, yeah. I don't think so. ABC won't risk the money to take on the largest cable company. I don't know. It depends on how easy the case would be to win. They would speak to lawyers first. I mean, like, ABC would have a team of lawyers. They would speak to that team of lawyers, and that team of lawyers would advise them on what the best decision would be. And they do what the lawyers recommend.
Children get shot to death in a school. It's cause and effect. That's what ABC News is telling you. That's not far from justifying.
Wait, holy shit. That's literally not what they said. It was Dominion? Okay. This is outright slander. He's literally putting words in, like, very slanderous words into this ABC host's mouth. Holy shit.
Mass murder.
Like, and it's very clear, by the way, that this ABC host probably isn't even pro-trans. Like, you can tell he doesn't even fully understand what the words he's saying mean. Like, when he's talking about trans people, like, as he's reading the script or the teleprompter, like, it looks like he has no idea what he's talking about. Like, and Tucker's trying to pretend like this host has an agenda. Like, the hosts on ABC aren't the same as Tucker, where, like, Tucker goes on there and he monologues his propaganda to his audience. That's what he's paid for. The ABC host is reading a teleprompter. Like, he's just, like, it's so bizarre. These people live in a fantasy world.
But others took the next step. A group called the Trans Resistance Network said that the shooter's death was a complex tragedy that resulted from, quote, anti-trans bias.
I don't agree with that.
The Hershey Chocolate Company's new trans spokesman, meanwhile, someone called Faye Johnstone, posted messages after the shooting complaining about, quote, trans misogyny. In Canada, a taxpayer fund...
Wait, what? A trans person who's famous posted after the shooting a tweet complaining about trans misogyny. Moving on. I like how he just found, like, an example of a famous trans person to, like, for an unrelated to all of this, just to try to claim was making excuses for the death of those children. Literal evil. Like, all that person did was post a tweet complaining about trans misogyny. From what I can tell, unrelated to the shooting, and Tucker's just like, let's throw this in as well. It's unrelated, but let's just throw this in as well. Find a popular trans person who has a platform we can send some hate towards.
Funded trans rights organization put out a statement that ignored the murder of the children in Nashville entirely and instead claimed that there has been a, quote, exponential rise in anti-trans violence. That is...
Wait, is he just calling out organizations that are, like, trans advocacy groups that haven't denounced the shooting? So we're doing the whole, like, so we're doing, like, the classic, like, BLM needs to denounce every crime a black person does thing? Is that what this is? I don't know if you remember this, but Fox News' go-to argument back when, like, BLM was, like, the boogeyman, like, first starting to become a boogeyman, was, like, why isn't the BLM organization answering for the crimes of these black people? And it would just be a random video of a random black person doing a crime. Like, not a BLM member, just a black person doing a crime. And Fox News would be like, what does BLM have to say on this? It's like, what? So I think Tucker's doing that right now, like finding random trans orgs that have put out a message recently or a statement recently that has nothing to do with the shooting and saying that means they're endorsing it. I really hope Tucker gets sued into the ground.
It's a lie. It's a provable lie. And in fact, the opposite is true. We seem to be watching the rise of trans terrorism. The man who tried to murder Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh after the repeal of Roe v. Wade, identified as a, quote, trans gamer girl. The man who shot up...
Wasn't that person trolling? Wasn't that person literally trolling? Okay.
A nightclub in Colorado in this past November and murdered 5 people.
They will murder you and then say you did it. For those that don't know, the Club Q shooter, the person who went to a gay nightclub to murder gay people and trans people, was a known Nazi. Like his password, I believe, was like a Nazi thing. His dad was like, thank God he was there killing gay people and wasn't gay himself when he found out about the shooting. Like there's a bunch of Nazi memorabilia and Nazi posts in his social media and his computer. It was very clear that he just claimed it in like the legal process as like a meme, because that's the level of derangement that guy was at. So these people will literally murder you and then say, that was you. No, you did that to yourself. Why are you hitting yourself? Stop hitting yourself. Stop hitting yourself. Hey, trans people, stop hitting. That's literally what they're doing right now. And they're doing the DreamWorks smile as they do it. Because remember, and I'll keep on saying this, to conservatives, cruelty to minorities is a virtuous act. One of the most virtuous acts you can do is to be cruel to minorities.
Identified as non-binary. And now this. And there could be more. Antifa has announced this coming Saturday is the, quote, Trans Day of Vengeance. Vengeance for what? That's not explained. But the suggestion is there will be violence.
We don't talk about what's happening on Trans Day of Vengeance on April 1st. I'm not going to speak on this because we're not going to talk about what's going to happen on that day.
In Washington this weekend. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted about this today, because if there's a day of vengeance coming, the rest of us should probably know about it.
It's going to be a protest. It's almost certainly going to be a peaceful protest. Remember, conservatives are anti-protesting. They're anti-First Amendment. They're only pro-First Amendment, pro-freedom of speech, pro-freedom of protest when they're doing it. They fight very hard against the right for left-wing people or minorities to protest because, rights for thee, but not rights for me, but not for thee,
about it. And for doing so, immediately had her official congressional Twitter account suspended. You're not supposed to talk about any of this, apparently. And the authorities in Nashville...
Damn, on Elon's Twitter, she must have gone wild.
Certainly are not planning to talk about it. They're doing their best not to. Here's the police chief of Nashville explaining that, while he's happy to talk about the shooter's guns, he's not going to tell you anything about the shooter's motives. Watch.
So in the manifesto, there's several different writings about other locations. There were locations, there was talks about the school. There was a map of the school, a drawing of how potentially she would enter and the assaults that would take place. There's quite a bit of writing to it.
The shooter was a trans man, by the way.
I have not read the entire manifesto. Our team and the FBI has been working on this.
Well, that's interesting. Within what seemed like minutes, we saw pictures of the rifles and the pistol. We now have horrifying body cam footage from within the school. So unsettling, we're not going to show it to you. But somehow we can't see the manifesto in which the killer explains why she killed.
Maybe the killer should have posted the manifesto online like the Christchurch shooter did. Remember, guys, when the Christchurch shooter killed 50-plus people in a mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand, and wrote a manifesto called The Great Replacement and wrote about how immigration from non-white countries is resulting in white people being replaced. This is literally what Tucker Carlson advocates for in his podcast, by the way, like the Great Replacement stuff. He literally says, like, immigration from non-white countries, white people are being replaced, whites have a right to be upset about this. That was basically exactly what the Great Replacement manifesto from the Christchurch shooter was all about. And conservatives' response to this, because, I mean, obviously the shooter himself, like, literally named conservative figures that, like, influenced him down his path to, like, radicalization, like, online. Their response was to say, do not look at the manifesto, do not name the shooter, do not give him attention. He wants attention, do not give him attention, and to try to pretend like it never happened and get it buried as quickly as possible. Here, though, it's, why can't we see the manifesto? Why can't we see the manifesto? Nazi shoots up a place and the manifesto is out. Don't share it around. Don't share it around. Trans person shoots up a place. Manifesto, where is it? Where is it? We need to see it. We need to see it.
Why is that? It's not accidental. Well, you know exactly why it is. Because it would make the obvious undeniable. The trans movement is targeting Christians, including with violence.
Just there. So, in case you don't know, by the way, this is him rallying people up to like get ready to like kill trans people in retaliation for this shooting. That's what the goal of this rhetoric is to do. And if that ends up happening, then there is a good chance that Tucker could be held to account for it, because, whew, I at least I hope so. Lol, that headline, the trans movement is targeting Christians.
Most Christian leaders in this country don't want to admit that. Admitting it might force them to take deeply unfashionable positions. But it is true.
Like
fascism? And anyone who's
fascism?
paying attention knows that it's true. And so, like most true things at this...
I feel like the word unfashionable was an intentional wording there on his part. Unfashionable opinions they would have to take publicly.
At this point, it is officially suppressed. Here, for example, is Joe Biden yelping again about how it's all your fault when these tragedies happen because you've got guns at home. This is from yesterday.
We have to do more to stop gun violence. It's ripping our communities apart, ripping the soul of this nation, ripping at the very soul of the nation. And we have to do more to protect our schools so they
Man, Biden is barely holding on.
aren't turned into prisons. You know, the shooter in this situation reportedly had 2 assault weapons and a pistol.
Fuck. Sorry, I had a fucking cringe spasm from hearing the word assault weapon from Biden's mouth. Sorry. He said the word. He said a trigger word. He said one of my trigger words. I'm sorry. Biden said one of my trigger words.
To AK-47. So I call on Congress again to pass my assault weapons ban.
So we're going to...
Okay, so that was not Biden saying... Does Tucker Carlson, like, slander this openly on his show every single night? How is he not getting sued constantly? Holy shit. No, he just said that we need to do something about gun violence in this country. That's all he said. He didn't say that legal, like, lawful gun owners were responsible for the shooting. That's literally not what he said at all. Not even close.
To prevent you from...
Why does he even play the clips? Why doesn't he just, like, show a picture of them and then, like, lie about what they said? Why does he play the clips and then lie about what they said after playing the clips? Are Fox News viewers that dumb? Do they, like, turn their brain off when Biden starts talking and then they just listen to, like, Tucker Carlson's retelling of what he said? Xander Hall, because Fox has billions of dollars and they can win any lawsuit thrown at them? Yeah, I guess so. That's intimidating, I suppose.
Learning why the shooter did it, and we don't have to guess because she wrote a whole manifesto about why she did it. And we know that she did that because she told a friend of hers on Instagram that she did it. But we can't see it. We can only talk about the guns. We can't know what kind of drugs she was taking, what kind of hormones or SSRIs or benzodiazepines. We can only guess. We can only talk about the guns. Pass my assault weapon.
Oh, in case you're curious, it's not just gender affirming care that Republicans are attacking now. They're also attacking the idea of mental health care. You'll have seen that, like, a lot of the figures in the incel community have been talking about how, like, therapy is bad, mental health counseling is bad, medications are bad, just go to the gym, just drink a beer, you're just sad, you're not depressed, there's no such thing as depression, people with anxiety disorders, etc. just want attention, it's just made up, whatever. You've probably seen a lot more of that kind of rhetoric. It's also kind of permeating, yeah, a little bit more into, like, the boomer Republican rhetoric, and now they're, like, on the attack against, like, medicines that are meant for people with like personality disorders and what have you, because the Republicans want to push this idea, like the Zoomers, the trans blue-haired Zoomers are making up these brand new mental illnesses for attention, and we need to ban them. Like, you'll have also seen with the Adderall shortage, a bunch of conservatives online have been gloating about how people with really bad ADHD can't get their Adderall prescriptions filled, saying, "I love seeing the addicts seething and coping about not being able to get their fix," because a lot of these people have genuinely been brainwashed into thinking that ADHD isn't real and that ADHD patients are just meth addicts who want amphetamines, even though Adderall is not literally the same as meth. Like, it's not the same. But yeah, and also ADHD patients forget to take their medication a lot, which isn't very characteristic of addicts with the drugs they're addicted to. Regardless, though, they're very bad people. They're very, very evil people.
Ban. That'll fix the problem. But Joe Biden is lying about that. He knows that he's lying, and you know that he's lying. Yesterday's massacre did not happen because of lax gun.
I feel like them using she, her pronouns is less about misgendering and more about wanting people to think the shooter was a trans woman. Yes, you're completely right, Sherry. You'll have noticed that Tucker never at any point said that the shooter identified as a trans man. Not even in a sarcastic, insulting way has Tucker said it, because Tucker has only said she, and said, and obviously her, and then referred to the shooter as trans, the implication being it was a trans woman. That is what Tucker wants people to think, because a trans man shooting something up, in the eyes of transphobes, is a woman doing it. Trans men don't really fall into the same scary crowd that the right wants them to. I'm probably going to have debates with conservatives in the future that bring up this shooting, thinking they're going to get a dub on me, and they're going to believe, they're going to indicate that they clearly don't know the facts behind it and think that the trans shooter was a trans woman. They're going to be called out for it, and they're going to look stupid, because that's going to be the idea that the shooter was a trans woman is going to be the easiest way to call out whether or not somebody is just bringing this up in an argument about trans issues, because they've just heard, they're going down the dialogue tree. It's going to be a very easy, early catch. That's my prediction, at least.
Laws. Yesterday,
so many of the conservatives I've debated clearly get all of their talking points and all their beliefs from Tucker Carlson and right-wing pundits. So they repeat what these people say.
Today's massacre happened because of a deranged and demonic ideology that is infecting this country with the encouragement of people like Joe Biden. Let's start by being honest about that.
Okay. So yeah, Tucker Carlson wants you dead, as do most of these conservative ghouls. Really is why, this video was, particularly that Club Q section was, Tucker literally doing the political version of "Why Are You Hitting Yourself?"